So our next session is Introduction to SQL Server 2022 by Mr. Javiers, and he's also a Microsoft MVP in data platform with 20 plus years of working experience, and yes, with the SQL Server including MS SQL. So let's welcome Mr. Javiers. Yeah,
Hello,
Javiers.
good day.
So yeah, good day. So I'm making you live, Javier, so you can share your slide also.
Okay, I'm preparing everything here. We still have a few minutes ahead, right? Or we're good to
Yeah,
go?
we are a bit ahead of with our schedule. No problem.
Okay, I'm just preparing my demo, my deck.
By the way, Mr. Javier, what's the time in your place right now?
Right here is 9:20 a.m.
Okay, early morning.
Early morning, yes, yes.
If we say weekend, it's early morning.
Yeah, we are few
Yeah,
hours
so let
behind.
me share your presentation as well. Here you go. Now your presentation is shared live. All right.
Okay, you tell me when we start. I can wait a few minutes. That's fine for me.
We can start right now also because since we have already finished our previous session a bit early. So if you are
Okay.
ready, we can start now.
Okay. What is the amount of time that I have ahead?
You are 10 minutes ahead.
No, but the whole presentation is 45
we have
minutes.
45 minutes.
45 minutes. Okay, very good. Let's start.
Sure.
Welcome everybody to Global AI Devs Day. This is a global initiative around the globe. I'm going to be participating in a few others later today. It's a pleasure to me to join you today here to talk about this topic that I found extremely interesting. And, you know, the idea is to get ready a little bit to the new major version of SQL Server 2022 that is still not final version, is still not released. It will be soon, so stay ahead. So let's discuss a little bit the most important things regarding to this new version. So name for the presentation is Introduction to SQL Server 2022. A little bit about myself. My name is Javier Villegas. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I work as IT director in the DBA and BI services areas at Mediterranean Shipping Company. I've been working with SQL Server for over 25 years. I am Microsoft MVP in the data platform category since 2016, and I'm also Microsoft certified trainer. I'm also one of the member of the Azure Data Community Advisory Council. I'm one of the local leaders of our community here in Argentina, SQL Argentina, in where we have our regular meetings, meetups, events. We just made one in-person event after a while. So quite excited about that. On the left side of the screen, you have my contact information, email, Twitter handle, LinkedIn, and my blog. in case you would like to get in touch with me, just network with me, or if you have any specific questions regarding to this presentation that you would like to ask me later. All right. Last year during Ignite, so I will say a little bit less than a year ago, Microsoft announced SQL Server 2022 in one of their major events. Back then, they announced it as what they call private preview, right? Private preview is a methodology that they have in that just only few customers and few Microsoft MVP are able to get those bits and start playing around, right? Just testing that private preview, just working with our own workload and just making sure that everything goes well, right? This way we can just get ready for SQL Server next version and also provide valuable feedback to Microsoft if we found some bugs and or something like that, that we can cooperate with the release. This year during build, Microsoft announced it as public preview. So at that point, not only few customers and few MVPs had the product to start playing with, but at that time, everybody was able to go to the Microsoft website and download this version and do exactly the same, right? Start playing with their own workload and provide feedback to Microsoft. At the current point, we are in what they call release candidate 1, right? So again, everybody can go there, download it, and start testing it, right? But this is still not the RTM version, the final version. Microsoft said that their idea is to release it during this calendar year. So we have 2 months ahead. So we are really looking forward to have the final version available soon, right? So this presentation will be just to highlight some of these new features in this major SQL Server version and see them in action. So what is interesting is that this is not, let's say, a new version out of nowhere, right? This is the continuation of hard work that the Microsoft SQL product group has been doing since several versions ago, since a while ago, right? The whole thing started with what Microsoft called the modern SQL Server version, which is SQL Server 2016, right? And from there, with in 2016, with certain features, the most important one back then was the introduction of Query Store. We're going to be talking about that. Then in 2017, the possibility of running SQL Server on the major Linux distribution like Red Hat, SUSE, and Red Hat, right? And also making some improvement in the performance area and the availability area, and also continuing with that journey in SQL Server 2019, they introduced what is called data virtualization, and they keep making changes and adjustments to the performance part. So this is a kind of marketing slide that represents quite well what is new in SQL Server 2022. Microsoft wants to highlight the benefit of these new versions, not just by saying there are this new feature, and this other new feature. No, we will see through the presentation that they have present challenges that they collect as feedback from their customers and the community, right? And to address those challenges, they came with a set of features, right, to try to help on that direction. So these are the main pillars of what we will see in SQL Server 2022. Business continuity using Azure, right? Remember in the first slide, we saw that this SQL Server 2022 version was presented as a hybrid data platform, right? Hybrid is, the possibility of having a merge between our on-prem SQL Server workload and Azure, right? So we will see that. So doing business continuity using Azure, right? We will, as I said, we're going to go through that. Azure Synapse Link to be able to have almost real-time analytics on the possibility of having in our warehouse real-time data from our operational databases. Governance with integration with Microsoft Pureview, right? The possibility of having also blockchain technology within SQL Server with the introduction of SQL Server Ledger, right? And the enhancements in the performance area, right? What they call building query intelligence, with the possibility of, or the main goal of just putting our databases running in SQL Server 2022 and make sure that they are in some sort of autopilot mode in terms of performance, right? So getting new benefit in terms of performance without any code change, right? That's the main goal. What is interesting here is that we won't see these features, these challenges only in SQL Server 2022. We will see them all through the Azure SQL platform, right? Azure SQL Database, Managed Instance, SQL Server running on virtual machines, and also Azure SQL Edge. So here we have some of those capabilities represented in this slide. What is called, as I said, hybrid platform, right, with the connectivity between SQL Server and Managed Instance, Pureview, and Synapse Analytics, right? The performance enhancement that we will cover extensively, right? A lot of enhancements in the area of security, scalability, and availability, right? Super important to be able to have a highly load transactional environment. Data virtualization, right, is a modern way to access data through data virtualization that we will cover in a bit. And also, finally, enhancements in the T-SQL area, right? On every major SQL Server version, Microsoft made some changes or add additional functions to the Transact SQL language in order to help us to do more with less, right? So write better code using less amount of lines. So we are connected now with Managed Instance for the business continuity. As I said, we're going to cover deeply, and we will see it in action in a bit. We will be able to have almost real-time analytics, right? Just replicating our operational tables with a dedicated SQL pool in Azure Synapse Analytics. The governance with Pureview, right? Enhancements in the authentication area. So now we will be able to use Azure Active Directory to authenticate our SQL Server users. And also all the Microsoft Defender for SQL services that we have available in Azure. Okay, let's present the first challenge, right? When we have to talk about business continuity, right, there are certain features, existing features like availability groups, which help us to set up high availability and disaster recovery for our SQL Server environment. We know that we have to put multiple servers, multiple clusters distributed between different data centers, between different Azure regions, etc. But what we definitely know is that even if this technology is quite mature and it's really proved and its work, it's quite hard to do the setup and to maintain the disaster recovery environment. We know that if we have a major problem in our data centers, like, for example, a natural disaster, a hurricane, a flooding, or whatever, we need to switch all our services to another data center and continue serving the applications from there. It's doable, but it's quite hard to do the setup and maintain, as I said. Now today, if we have an availability group, we only can have participants on that availability group, which are SQL servers. Could be different versions. Eventually, we use distributed availability group, but it has to be the SQL Server product. Right? Now, in SQL Server 2022, we will be able to have an availability group, in this case, a distributed availability group, combining a SQL Server 2022, right, and an Azure SQL managed instance. This way, we can synchronize our user databases against a managed instance, use the managed instance as read-only replica, eventually, if we need it to, for read-only workload. And also, we have the possibility of doing a failover from SQL Server 2022 to managed instance. So we can switch the roles, right? We know that in an availability group scenario, only one replica is the primary, the read-write replica. All the others are read-only replica, right? Well, with 2022, we can failover and switch the roles between SQL Server and managed instance. So if we have our data center, right, we can easily set up a disaster recovery with a managed instance running in Azure, and eventually, if we have a problem, right, we can use the managed instance as the new primary without losing any data because it's going to be synchronized. This is really a really great introduction, and we will see it in action in a minute. Additionally, and something that it was not possible, it is not possible with SQL Server 2019, is that today, if we take a backup of our user databases in SQL Server 2019, we can go and restore it to a managed instance, right? But we cannot take a backup of the user databases in managed instance and restore those backups to SQL Server 2019. Well, with SQL Server 2022, we will be able to take a backup of a managed instance and restore those back files to SQL Server 2022, right? So really easy to integrate and, to have these hybrid services and, showing SQL Server product and Azure SQL, in this case, managed instance, right? The next challenge that we have today in the analytics world is that when we have to set up an ETL process, right, for filling up our data warehouse, ETL is extraction, transformation, and load of our operational SQL servers to the data warehouse, right? It's quite heavy. It's quite, let's say, difficult to set up and maintain. And when we run those ETL processes, right, the data that we transfer get out of date immediately, right? Because this is, these are processes that we run periodically, once a day, once every hour, once every 6 hours. So, all the data that we send to the data warehouse using those ETLs, right, and then we do the business intelligence and eventually the reporting at the top of it, is using data that is out of date. It's not live, right? Well, now with SQL Server 2022, we're going to be able to basically synchronize certain tables in our user databases in SQL Server 2022 with a dedicated SQL pool in Azure Synapse Analytic. This way, if we have our main application running on SQL Server, and we can send the operational data immediately to Synapse, and from there we can do anything we need in terms of warehousing, in terms of machine learning, and at the top of it, set up a Power BI dashboard. This way, if someone is doing something in the operational area, in a matter of few minutes, we will have this data reflected in our Synapse, and from there have dashboard using real-time data, not data that is out of date. So let's see these two features in action, right? Manage instance link and Synapse link. What I have here is my virtual machine running SQL Server 2022 here, right? And we have certain databases in here. And I will connect to a managed instance and to the dedicated SQL pool in Synapse Analytic. Right? I have all my components in here. So let's say that I have a new database and I want to synchronize it with my managed instance. So we just need to go here, we select one of the database, we do right click, and now we have this new menu called Azure SQL Managed Instance Link. And with that, we have two options: replicate database or failover database, right? So to do the setup, we just need to do replicate. So we go here again, replicate. So then it's quite simple. We just need to follow this wizard, right? It's going to check for the prerequisite. Till now, we have to have these two trace flags enabled on the SQL Server, right? Then, we just need to find the databases that we want to synchronize, right? To put into distributed availability group, and then we just, finish the wizard. I will cancel this part and I will show you here that, we have for each user database that we put into the Azure SQL link, we have an availability group and a distributed availability group. So this way we have these two groups and these two groups. And if we go to my managed instance, we have the databases fully synchronized. How we can see this in action? Okay, quite simple. Here I am connected to my SQL Server 2022 virtual machine. I have this demo database and this table called sample table CSV. I just did a select count and select from the table ordered by ID. So there are 143,000 rows, and the first ID is 2306, sorry. If I go to my managed instance, I go to the same database. I just go there and I have exactly the same data. Additionally, and also to show you the other feature, which is, Synapse link, here I am connected to the dedicated SQL pool in Azure Synapse Analytics. I have exactly the same table and the same data. So I go to my main SQL Server 2022, and I say, okay, I will delete, let's say, few rows from here. This is my SQL, my demo DB in SQL Server 2022. So I just delete few rows. If I do the select, my first ID is 2313 now. I go to my manage instance. I just do a select here again, and I see exactly the same information that I had in my primary. This is same as an availability group. If I go here to my replica, which is a managed instance, and then try to delete, I get exactly the same error message, which is file to update, because the database is in read-only mode. So in this database, we can only do select. We cannot do update or delete. Additionally, if I go to my dedicated SQL pool in Synapse, I do the select, count, and the order by ID, and I see exactly the same amount of row. So in this case, in this demo, I combine both features, manage instance link, right, and Synapse link. This way, from a single user database in SQL Server 2022, I am synchronizing both a managed instance for disaster recovery purposes, or eventually, to use it for read-only workload, and to my dedicated SQL pool in Synapse Analytics. Really, really powerful. So let's go back to the demo. Sorry, to the deck. And this area is the part that I like the most, which is everything that is related to performance, right? Microsoft is doing a great job just by adding features to this platform that is called Intelligent Query Processing, right? In this version, what they call BNX, right? With this purpose of enhancing, right, the performance just out of the box, and also to solve one of the problems that we as DBAs we have seen since forever, which are the regression problem. A regression problem, in a nutshell, is in those cases in where you have a report, a stored procedure, an important process that normally takes half an hour to run. It runs, in the middle of the night, and every morning when we, come to the office, we have the result. One day, out of nowhere, right, this stored procedure starts taking forever and it's not finishing. When we go and check with the users, nobody changed a single line of code. This stored procedure wasn't changed in years. So we don't know why yesterday it was taking 30 minutes and today it's been running for 2-3 hours with no result. Actually, we know the problem is that the SQL Server most probably recompiled that stored procedure, came up with a new execution plan, which was not as efficient as the previous one, right? What Microsoft is trying to do is to address those kind of problems. Again, with the introduction of Query Store back in SQL Server 2016, right? And with Intelligent Query Processing starting 2017, with an addition set of features in 2019, and now in 2020. 2022, right? To give you an idea of what we can do with this is that, basically, historically, actually, when SQL Server came with an execution plan, right, that execution plan was completely static, right? That means that it was compiled, it was stored in cache, and all the upcoming executions will be using that plan with no change. That means is that the plan was not efficient, right? Doesn't matter, it's going to keep using it, right? For example, one of the most common problems, which was initially addressed in 2017, was the one that is called actually memory grant feedback, right? Let's say that when you execute the store procedure for the very first time, right, what SQL Server is doing is, okay, I give you this plan, I compile this plan, and I grant you 10 megabytes of memory, right? So every time that you run this procedure, SQL Server will grant 10 megabytes for that execution. We have the plan, we store it into cache, and then we keep executing that procedure. Let's say that the following execution, for certain reason, because maybe we use a different parameter, instead of using 10 megabytes of memory, it's only using 1 megabyte of memory. So it's wasting 9 megabytes of memory, right? You can tell me, well, that is not a big deal. I have servers with a lot of memory these days. Just wasting 9 megabytes is not a big deal. But what if I tell you that that specific store procedure is being executed hundreds of times per minute, right? For every single execution, SQL Server will be granting 10 megabytes, and at the end of the day, it's going to be using 1 megabyte. So it's going to be wasting a lot, right, of memory, right, having impact on the whole instance. And what about if it is the other way around, right? We just have 10 megabytes granted, but the executions requires 20 megabytes. What SQL Server will do is it will execute, right? It's going to take a long time to execute it. And the reason is that it's going to be using the 10 dB, right, to fulfill that memory that was not granted through the execution plan. With intelligent query processing and, the memory grant feedback option, so every time that we execute the procedure, right, the engine was returning a feedback saying, hey, I need more memory, or I'm not using all this memory, and is adjusting those parameters for the upcoming execution, right? And with that, each execution will be way more efficient than the previous one. That was first introduced in SQL Server 2017. In 2019, right, Microsoft added an additional layer to this, right? Initially, it was called adaptive query processing in 2017. Then in 2019, it branded intelligent query processing, right? And it addressed certain cases. The most important one was this one called scalar UDF inlining, right? And this was a problem that historically SQL Server has since the very first versions that we saw around. And the problem was that when we have a scalar function with a bunch of business logic underneath, and the end result is a scalar value, right? When we use that function within the select or within the predicate, SQL Server was not considering the function like it has any weight at all. You say, oh, this is a scalar, it has absolutely no weight, so it's not gonna have impact in the overall query plan. We have seen many cases in where these scalar functions were extremely complex with a lot of business logic, and SQL Server was getting really inefficient plans because of assuming that the scalar function has no weight at all, right? Back then, we used to have a ton of problem with CPU usage because of this specific problem. In 2019, with this approach of a scalar UDF inlining, what SQL Server was doing back then was, compiling the definition of the scalar function and then using that definition within the main execution plan, and the result was a way more efficient plan. Right? Now in SQL Server 2022, right, we have few other cases to make this a little bit more efficient than what it used to be. Right? We know that setting up the max degree of parallelism, right, for our SQL Server instance, for our user database, or even using a hint is quite complex, right? Because first of all, we have to identify within our workload that there is a process that may need to lower down the DOP or put it, a little bit bigger than the one we have. Then we have to identify the process. We have to manually put the hint or change the DOP at the database level, then run it again, make sure that the execution was more efficient, and then make sure that the upcoming execution we're using that. But that requires us to modify the code, besides identifying the process that requires this treatment. Right? The same for any other hint, right? We know that certain queries may work better using a specific hint or reducing the compatibility level, right? Because of any reason. But again, the process is just identified, right? Make the change in the code, then verifying, right? And then leaving it there. Right? That is a task that every single DBA has to do in the monitoring and troubleshooting process, right? Well, now in SQL Server 2022, right, using Query Store as the main performance repository, right, what SQL Server is doing is all that, what I just said, right, for compatibility level or cardinal estimation and degree of parallelism, right? Identifying every single process running within our user database that may require to lower down the DOP, right? Or change the compatibility, the cardinal estimation for that, right? Setting it automatically for us, verifying it, and using it from that point onward. This way is, just us putting the database in autopilot mode. And the most important thing is that we don't have to do anything, not even modify a single line of code, right? Because again, it's using SQL Server Query Store as the repository. We will see it in action. So, intelligent query processing, next generation is the solution, right? This, as I said, relies on Query Store. Then there is another caveat for performance purposes, which is parameter sensitive plan optimization, PSP optimization. This is a quite interesting thing that we will cover in a second, right? So for intelligent query processing, IQP next generation, how we can use all this? Well, first of all, of course, we need to use SQL Server 2022. We have to set up the database compatibility level to 160, right? So this way we can use DOP feedback and CE feedback, right? Now in SQL Server 2022, for the very first time, Query Store is enabled by default when we create a brand new database, right? Between 2016, 17, and 19, when we create a database, Query Store was disabled by default, so we had to enable it manually in case we need it. This is not the case in Azure SQL Database and Managed Instance, in where Query Store is enabled by default. So This other thing, this one more thing in regarding to performance optimization, which is parameter sensitive plan optimization. And this is also to try to solve a big problem that we have seen and we're seeing a lot, which is parameter sniffing. Right? So let's say that we have a new store procedure, right? You know that when you execute it for the very first time, it will come up with a plan, right? And we can pass, for example, one parameter, right? For example, the number 1, and it will compile the query plan using that parameter. And let's say that in this example, it will require to do a seek in a specific table. Then we run the same procedure using a different parameter, for example, the number 10, right? And to do that, right, it's going to be way more efficient if we do a table scan instead of a seek, right? So let's say that if we have in the plan cache the plan that is using a scan, and then we go back using the parameter number 1, right? It's going to be using a plan in the cache that is not ideal for that situation. Now, in SQL Server 2016, with PSP optimization, we're going to be executing and compiling the store procedure with the first parameter. It's going to come up with one plan, the seek. Then we will run it again with a different parameter, and it will compile a different plan with the scan, right? And for the very first time, what SQL Server will be doing is keeping both plans in the cache. So depending which parameter we use, it's going to choose one plan or the other. Of course, it's not going to create a plan for every single parameter. It will create for 2 of them, right? So it will choose, depending on the input parameters, to use one plan or the other. This way, the execution will be and is way, way more optimal than before. And again, all this without any user intervention, right? Which is great. So let's see this in action, see feedback and DOP feedback, right? So first of all, let's see memory grant feedback. What I'm doing here is just cleaning the procedure cache, cleaning the query store, just doing some updated statistics for the demo purpose. And what I have here is just a simple store procedure that I'm creating. And I'm creating it for the very first time. The name is SP demo MGF. Right? Good. I will be executing this procedure for the very first time. So I just have it here. I'm running it. Let's see how long it takes. Still running. Right? It's going to take a few seconds. More than what I expected, right? But it's running. This thing is going to be finishing. Oh, it's taking way longer than out. This is because it's not warming up, but you will see it in action. Well, while this one finished, what I wanted to show you here is that the very first execution, which compiles the plan and it grants certain amount of memory, here it took 52 seconds to return this amount of rows. So we will check this view and say, hey, we have a memory grant feedback here. Maybe we need to adjust the memory that was granted, right? I will execute the store procedure for the second time, exactly the same store procedure, right? No count change, no nothing, right? And let's see the behavior, right? This time it took 3 seconds instead of 40 something, right? Why was that? Right? Because it adjusts the memory on the fly, right? So I say that, you know, the execution required less amount of memory, so we adjust it on the fly. This way, right, again, without us doing anything, we saw that the first time the store procedure took a lot of time, but then the upcoming execution is taking nothing, right? So let's go quickly to the other demo for CE feedback, right? What I'm doing here is just creating an extended event session so we see this in action, right? Then again, I got the Adventure World X database. I changed the compatibility level to 160. I cleared the query store and also the procedure cache, right? So nothing fancy. Here, what I'm doing is creating a new store procedure, right? What we will be doing from this point onward is executing this store procedure 15 times. But before doing so, we will go to our SQL Server 2022. We go to the extended events, right? The session that we just create, CE feedback, and we will see go watch live data, right, to see what we get here. So we execute the store procedure 15 times. Right? Very good. Nothing weird, nothing in here. So we will check if there is any recommendation to be done, and no, it's empty. Now we will execute that store procedure one more time. Okay, interesting. We go to the extended event, and now we see some entries here, right? The entries is saying query feedback analysis, and it's saying, hey, if we use this hint, assume mean selectivity for filter estimate, for this specific query ID is gonna run better. I'm just proposing this. Okay, very good. So I will check on my DMVs again, and I see exactly the same. I have the proposal, and here it's saying pending validation, right? So I run my procedure one more time. This time I go back to the extended event, and I see here query feedback validation, right? And now it's giving you the fact that, you know, now is using the original CPU time was this number, almost 4,000, and now after applying the hint is 3,000. When we go back here and we check on the DMV, now it's not only a proposal with pending validation, it's verification pass. And this is the query ID number 2, right? And the hint that is using, right? Before 2022, what we had to do is, within all the workload in our user database, identify this specific statement within this specific store procedure, right? Say, hey, if we use this hint, it's gonna be better. Open the store procedure, recompile it with this hint, and then wait until it gets executed again and make sure that the execution time is better than before, right? Now, SQL Server is doing it for us without any effort, all right? So really, really nice feature. And again, trying to accomplish this objective of putting everything in autopilot mode. quite impressive. Okay. In other enhancements at the SQL Server level, as we said, scalability, security, and availability are three of the main important pillars within SQL Server. So in the security part, as I said, SQL Server Ledger, the possibility of having blockchain technology within SQL Server will be there. We will see it in a minute. Scalability, right, with enhancements on TempDB and buffer pool parallel scan operations. And in terms of availability, right, for the very first time, we have what is called contained availability groups, right? Contained availability groups is something that will help us to synchronize with the replicas, not only the user database, but also the system objects like logins and SQL Shop, right? This is something that today is quite hard to do. We have to do it with, DBA tools, for example, or doing it manually. Now with contained availability group, we will be able to do it automatically within SQL Server. So these three areas, security, scalability, and availability, also have a ton of enhancement, right? So another challenge, right? I want the power of blockchains in my SQL Server. And why I would need that? Let's say that we have a system, an application running in our SQL Server that is storing a lot of information, which we have to make sure that these changes are not tampered. Nobody changed it. Not even the sysadmin goes there and manually fix some data. Let's say some important application that may require this super important thing. So not even the sysadmin should have the possibility of doing this. Well, with SQL Server Ledger, right, we will be able to create these ledger tables in SQL Server 2022, right? So nobody will be able to modify the data, right? We will be able also to provide to an external source that the data was not tampered, so nobody changed it, right, with a cryptographic signature, right? So this way, we are 100% sure that these tables are not changed at all. So when we create one of these tables, we have two ways of doing. The append only, so we only can insert new rows, right? Or the, let's say, change table, but we will be able to keep a history table on what was changed by whom, what time, and which were the values. So definitely something to pay attention, because definitely it's going to be really, really interesting. Another enhancements, right, at the engine level, for example, XML compression, enhancement in the OLTP memory area, right? Enhancements also in distributed availability groups. So yeah, a lot of features that are coming in this new version. Then let's say that the last challenge will be, or one of the last challenges could be, need to access to a modern object storage system using SQL Server. Let's say that we have a data lake with Parquet file, CSV file, or anything, and we would like to access this from SQL Server. Well, remember the Polybase feature from before? Well, this is an enhancement to that initial Polybase, in where, again, we can create external table on a data lake on an S3 compatible system, right? And store the Parquet JSON CSV files over there, and from SQL Server use those as external table, right? So super interesting and really, really good. and also enhancements in the SQL, right? I really want to, do things using just native function instead of having to write a ton of queries. So there are new functions like greatest, lists, enhancements in string split, right? So a bunch of things coming ahead to pay attention. All right. Reaching the end, and as a summary, right, SQL Server 2022 is Azure-enabled for disaster recovery, analytics, and security, right? With the intelligent part, definitely, doing enhancements in the performance in a wide spectrum, right, without code change, right? A lot of innovation in security, scalability, and availability, possibility of accessing modern storage, right, and extending the T-SQL language. If you would like to start playing with this today, here you have a few links, right? To start with, aks.ms/SQL Server 2022, you will find all the information related to this new version. Stay tuned because close to this day, we're going to have news about the final version. If you want to download the release candidate today, aks.ms/get SQL Server 2022. So those are your starting point. And with that, I just leave a few minutes for questions. If there are questions, again, my contact information in there in case you want to reach me later. So thank you so much. And
thank you, JVS. Yeah, so we got a much better, deep understanding of SQL Server 2022 with huge improvement and many new features are coming there. And also, I was mostly interested about that blockchain features in centralized database. That is a ledger feature, SQL Ledger. So I think this is going to be another game changer for SQL Server also, because
absolutely.
since it has a capability that even system admin cannot change the data within the SQL Server. So yes, this is going to be another, I think, a turning point for them. So with that, I don't see any questions from the audience. So I think we can now move to now another one. You have anything to share, JVS? No.
No. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And so yeah, looking forward to to participate again in the future.
Yeah, sure. It was really a nice session and nice to talk to you. And then I will now move to now my closing and this session. So let me go to that. Yeah.
All right. Very
Thank
good.
you.
Okay. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So with this, we are at the end of our today event. So with that, I would like to add something here. Let me share my screen. Hmm. Yeah, so if you have any question or any concern, you can drop your message or you can reach out to us later on through reset.com. You can reach us via LinkedIn or like even Twitter @reset. And with that, I'd like to hear some feedback since this event is there. So I would like to hear some feedback from you for some improvement which we can improve in our next session. So here is a QR code or link through which you can share your feedback about this session. And with this, we are at the end of the session. So I hope you enjoyed the sessions. Uh, and also some you got some useful knowledge on AI and machine learning. I appreciate our speakers' effort and contribution with the wonderful session to make this event successful. We will also upload the recording in YouTube. Please check the update in reset.com. Uh, so I would like to again appreciate the speakers, their contribution towards this great session. Thank you. And once again, please share your feedback.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all the speakers and the attendees, for your time and effort. Thank you. Bye.
So now we are ending the session formally.